Well, Crystal Palace now genuinely fear that they will lose their place in the Europa League and play in the Conference League instead next season. Of course, Palace have never played in Europe before, and it seems as if their lack of heritage and history in Europe may count against them when UEFA finally decide whether they can play in the Europa League. Palace earned their place in the Europa League by winning the FA Cup, the first major trophy in their history, in May, but they may now lose that place if UEFA decide that US businessman John Textor has decisive influence at both Palace and Lyon. Palace are known to have support from many other Premier League clubs who have sympathy for their predicament and believe that Palace have earned their right to play in the Europa League. And I think Palace are now starting to feel like a pawn in the chaotic world of multi-club ownership. John Textor has agreed to sell his shares in Crystal Palace, and he's also stepped down as a director. In the background, Palace worked hard to facilitate the sale of his shares in the club to the US businessman Woody Johnson. Textor, this is really important, bought his shares in Crystal Palace before he started investing in other clubs around the world. And there is nothing Palace could do about that because it is permitted under UEFA rules. Now, the onus was on Eagle Football Holdings, John Textor's company, to prove that they complied with UEFA's multi-club ownership rules before the deadline of March the 1st, and that was not done. And last October, Textor's Eagle Football Holdings announced that they had debts of £422 million, whereas Palace, meanwhile, are regarded as being one of the best-run clubs in England.
Harvey, so if the worst comes to the worst for Palace, do they play in the Conference League, and do Forest get promoted to the Europa League?
I think that is a real possibility now. What we have to wait for is, incredibly, a decision from French football's financial watchdog, DNCG. They are meeting in Friday. Then they almost hold the fate of Crystal Palace's European future in their hands, because the reason they are meeting is that they have already decided to relegate Lyon from the French top division to the second division because Lyon have broken French football's financial rules. Now, if that relegation is confirmed, then Lyon have agreed that they will not play in the Europa League next season, and that would be the green light for Crystal Palace to play in the Europa League. But guess what? Lyon have appealed against their relegation, and that is why we're having a meeting of the DNCG on Friday. If they overturn their earlier decision to relegate Lyon and Lyon stay in Ligue 1, I think that may well mean that UEFA will decide that Crystal Palace will have to play in the Conference League instead of the Europa League next season. It is a really big mess, and it is a mess that hasn't been created by the people who run Crystal Palace. This is a situation that has come about because of John Textor's dream of creating a multi-club ownership group called Eagle Holdings. Now, we know Steve Parish, the executive chairman of Crystal Palace, is totally against multi-club ownership in football. But when John Textor first invested in Crystal Palace, of course, he hadn't bought his interest in Lyon or Botafogo or a club in Belgium as well. And there was nothing Steve Parish or anybody at Crystal Palace could do about it. If you look at what's happening as well in French football, in the past 24, 48 hours, John Textor has actually resigned as president and chairman of Lyon. He's resigned as a director. And does that happen? Has that happened because he's trying to prove to the French football authorities, is he trying to say to them, look, I'm no longer involved at Lyon. Yes, we got ourselves into a terrible mess. Yes, we've built up debts of £422 million. Yes, you have relegated us. But look at what's happened now. I've walked away. Other people are now running the club. So you should allow us to stay in League One. And if that happens, that may well mean that Crystal Palace, who earned the right to play in the Europa League, let's get real, they won the FA Cup against all odds. Everybody remembers the incredible scenes at Wembley when they won the FA Cup, when they beat Manchester City in May. That was a great, great occasion for Crystal Palace fans. And what they had to look forward to as well was playing in the Europa League. And that dream could be taken away from them.